Now that we all have come to a common realization about the need to prepare ourselves for the future demands from HR fraternity as a whole, it is very essential that we prepare ourselves for it. Moving forward with the first topic of the day, HR analytics. If well implemented and directed, can boost organizational productivity, help drive strategy, and lead to significant cost savings within the business. If you're measuring the right things in the right way, HR analytics can have a significant positive effect on the organization's bottom line.
We have with us Mr. Gloryson and Mr. Anil Kumar Mishra, who shall help us understand the technique of selection of metrics and gathering the data, and also look at how the data can be used to influence change and shape one's business people's strategy. Mr. Gloryson is a professor of organization behavior at XLRI Jamshedpur, is here with us to deliver the first session on HR analytics. Mr. Gloryson completed his post-graduation from Symbiosis Institute of Management Studies, Pune in 1999 and PhD from IIM Bangalore in 2008. His functional areas is organizational management and is renowned for his work in HR field. I would like to invite Professor Gloryson on stage. Please give a huge round of applause for Mr. Gloryson. I would request Mr. Sanjay Dave to please accompany our speakers on stage. Okay. Mr. Rahul. Thank you.
So good morning all of you. I'm very happy to be here. After giving the initial commitment, I thought of just moving out due to some other personal constraint. Later I had a talk with Hirsch and finally he convinced me to come here. And after coming here, I'm very happy, and this is an opportunity which I should not have missed. In XLRI, while I look at the way in which this session is happening, it's mostly under the topic HR measurement. So after coming here, I realized that the session goes on for around 75 minutes. And while I look at it from that particular context, it's slightly difficult for me to have a session without any question coming from the audience side. And I can also understand some of you may be sitting or facing a faculty after a long period of time. And there are also some participants whom, which I was told going through the program, so you are already facing it. So what I would prefer, at any point of time you can stop me, ask any question, and I designed the slides in such a way that every answer won't be there while I take you through these concepts. So feel comfortable in stopping me in between so that it won't end up as a monologue. That's number one. Number two, I will be taking you through multiple examples after giving you some idea about it. So I will start with my first exposure to HR analytics. That point of time it was not known as HR analytics, and that was the period while I was doing my PGDM in Symbiosis. So I start with that article. Then I will take you through something which majority of you might have observed just 6 days back, and another way by which we can use HR analytics. Then I will take you through a scenario which you as an HR professional may need to face, let me say, after 15 years. So that particular instance I have taken from a book with the title Predictive Analytics for Human Resources. So I'm slightly modifying it and presenting it to you. And there we see a scenario wherein separation management is handled. Okay, so after that we will get into the concepts. Multiple illustrations I will take you through. And please remember, it is not a topic which you can become an expert only by attending to 2 sessions. I will be dealing mostly at a conceptual level with multiple examples. After that, Anil will take you through the details of a specific example. So how to implement it in multiple details. Then after listening to both the topics, again you are free to ask questions which both of us combinedly try to address to the best of our abilities. So let me take you through the first slide. Okay, so the first example which I would prefer you to go through. So this is based on an HBR article which got published during 1997 or 1998. So this study started during 1992. It's from a retail organization by name Sears. As a fresh graduate who was doing postgraduate diploma, I was reading through some of the books which are available in our library, and I come across this. I was slightly disappointed to get selected to an HR program, because even at that point of time I realized action happens or business focus is mostly with other functions. And while I was going through this article, I found following thing: 5-unit increase in employee attitude. Maybe slightly difficult for some of you to see. I will just repeat it. I will just read it out. 5-unit increase in employee attitude will increase customer satisfaction or customer attitude by 1.2 units, which will ultimately result in 0.5 unit increase in sales turnover. In other words, even at that point of time, they are talking about some ability to predict what we can do as HR professional. If I'm going back to what Mr. Mahatma was saying some time back, as a strategic partner, how can we contribute towards the sales turnover of a given firm? Now, we are not going to do something on marketing directly. We are not going to do something on operations, but rather by focusing on something which we are responsible directly for, that is employees, their attitudes, their satisfaction. How can we increase? And another stakeholder, that is customer, and what is the relationship? So this is the first exposure for me into HR analytics. Now at that point of time, it was not known as HR analytics. So in this HBR article, they use the term measurement. And their original intention was not to come up with this kind of a relationship or ability to predict, but rather they wanted to convert their organization into a compelling place to shop. A compelling place wherein people can invest their money. I mean, people should buy the stocks of Sears as an organization. Then they also realized it will happen only while it is going to become a compelling place to work. And with that focus, they started their study. They wanted to know what employees are really interested in. What should the organization do? So they initially had around 70 questions, mostly focusing on nature of skills, the development of an employee, and later while they did their analysis through multiple iterations, it took years for them to complete it, they finally focused on around 10 questions. Those questions were the following. So, okay, let me take you to those aspects. Number 1, the attitude towards the job, attitudes towards the company. So while we are trying to improve those aspects, and in that particular study they were able to measure it through just 10 questions, the employee behavior is changing. While employee is going to behave in a different manner, whether it is somebody who is categorized as a labor, or whether it is going to be a very competent professional, the talent, as Mr. Mahatma was referring to, their behavior will change. While employees' behavior is changing, the customers will be able to perceive that the employees in this organization is more helpful for us. They are providing the service. They walk an extra step, or they are willing to do something extra to provide us the required support. And they feel better value to come to this organization. And they are also saying while employee behavior changes, they prefer to continue in the firm, employee retention goes up, which ultimately result in better customer impression. So this is the first exposure for me into HR analytics that happened around 15 years before. Then I'm going to give you an example. Again, I'm following the way which Mahatma was referring to. I'm giving an example from cricketing context. And according to the latest reports, at least some of the reports, I'm going to talk about an event which is watched by maximum number of people in digital medium. That happened around exactly 6 days before. That's related to the last match we had between India and Pakistan. Look at another way by which the analytics is used. So they were referring about few more additional points, but I just picked up those pointers which the television was showing or which the broadcasters were showing before the commencement of match. So according to what they were saying, for Pakistan to win, what they should do, if they are able to restrict India to below 260, then their probability to win is increased to around 86%. So Pakistan, typically while they chase a target of up to 260, there's a high probability for them to win. I'm talking about the performance of a team, how to set targets, and how to distribute individual goals. There comes the second point. Afridi, he should not give more than 5 runs per over. And in such instances, I'm talking about the analytical data based upon the performance of Pakistan outside their own continental situations. So I will talk about all those contextual factors at a later stage. Remember, we are not going to look at the data that was existing in the past, the entire data. So if you look at, some of you may be aware, if you are looking at the entire history of matches between India and Pakistan, Pakistan has got an edge. So here look at the way in which we are defining the context, not me, how they defined it. And while you move into an HR analytic project, you need to define the context in such a manner. The reason once, after 2011, not in subcontinental kind of a situation, outside Asia, what will happen? Afridi should not give more than 5 runs. If that is the case, Pakistan has got more than 71% chance to win. Now, while we look at from the Indian context, remember, this is before India starts batting. That's the time wherein they have presented this data. India should try to score more than 280 runs. 73% of time, while India has succeeded in defending targets more than 280. So that should be India's target. So before starting the match, everybody knows what they are trying to attain. Then the next option, another thing, the opening pair should score more than 50. In reality, India lost the first wicket at the score of around 37. So that particular pointer, or maybe that particular objective, Indian team was not able to attain, but then maybe during the next few overs, India may try to play a little more defensively so that the damage is not going to continue. So we know what we are supposed to do and what should we do to attain our target. So opening pair should score more than 50. In such cases, India is able to win more than 67% of matches. There are also additional pointers which are come at a later stage. I'm not referring to it, but just to give you some more pointers. If India needs to win, it is important for India to take 2 wickets in the first 10 overs. They have broadcasted that particular information. It is also important for Pakistan to win. They should have minimum 2 50-run partnership. So while I look at the entire pointers of the analytical output coming in, it is possible for us to have a better clarity. Remember, I'm not talking about 100% certain aspects. 86%, 71%, 73 and 67. What are we supposed to do to attain some objective? And while we look at the ender, based on the hindsight while we are looking at it, we can see 3 out of the 4 situations India was able to win, and India lost the second wicket after some point of time. In other words, even the 4th criteria they were able to manage, so that India's probability to succeed is increasing. We are able to predict what will happen to that match. So, while I talk about HR analytics, please remember, we are moving much beyond measurement. It is not just about measuring something, but it is also about predicting, and we are not going to stop at the level of prediction, we are also moving one step ahead. We are also going to prescribe what we are expected to do. So 3 aspects, starting with measurement, then we are moving into prediction, then we are moving into prescription. I will give you another illustration at a later stage. Now let me just share with you what will happen maybe after 15 years. So this is based on a book with a title, I have given the name of the book towards end, which got published during 2013 or 2014 in India. So this is something which I was mentioning, predictive analytics for human resources. So they have given this example in a US context. Okay, I will summarize it. So you are a new HR professional. You might have worked in some other firm, but you moved into this firm very recently, and you are learning about the organization, the way in which work is happening. So you are with your senior colleague, and you are just observing the way in which termination happens in a firm. So one of the person who had a reputation of a solid performer, he is being asked to leave. The person is raising multiple concerns, but the organization have taken a decision and they decided to end the employment relationship. So now while observing it, there are some more additional information that is coming to you. This person was a great performer for the last 5 years. And that's why he was able to work in this firm for around 7 years after that drop in performance. So around 2 years back, this person has got a promotion with a huge hike in salary. And with that promotion, his performance has come down. He has become just an average performer. Now, as a new employee, you are asking a question. Will all the average performers are sacked in this particular firm? Now, the colleague is responding to you by saying, no, that is not the case. The HR information system or the alert system that exists in our firm indicated an employee who is not able to improve his performance for the 2 years, who was considered to be a great performer in the past, has got a higher tendency to leave our firm. So the HR system provided an alert last month and reported that there is a 75% chance for this person to move to one of our competitors. That's what the last trend suggests. And he quits all of a sudden. We will be in slight difficult situation. So while the percentage improves beyond 75%, we start our analysis. We look for somebody who can substitute this particular person. And last week, this person took an off on a Monday. And if I'm talking about Ahmedabad, there is a possibility while we look at the way in which HR activities are scheduled. Interviews may typically happen either on a Monday or maybe towards the end of the week. I don't know whether that's a trend. Now, since one of your employees who has got 75% chance to leave is taking a day off on a Monday, then your HR analytics system or the ability to predict it is increasing the possibility for that person to leave. In immediate future, that particular percentage or the probability is increasing from 75% to 90%. So it is better for you to be prepared for such an eventuality. Then you are looking for the options available for you. So the senior is telling to you, we are not sacking the person only because he is an average performer, but we are looking at multiple options that are available with us at this point of time. And there, while we look at the alternatives available with us, it tells us there are 20 candidates who are in job market that can replace this particular person at this point of time. We do not know what will happen maybe after 1 month or 2 months while this person completes his notice period. And out of those 20 people, again, there are more than 20 people, but there are 20 people who have got more than 25% higher experience and who are also receiving 20% lesser salary. There are hundreds of people, out of which around 25% have got more experience and they are getting salary less than around 20%. So that's an information that is available with you. And this book, or rather me myself, is not going to suggest you to sack a person while you have got a better option. We need to consider multiple factors. That's not the message which I am trying to communicate. The next thing, why look at those 20 people, 5 of them are women. And after 15 years, we may reach to a level wherein the preferences of different people are considered even while selecting the superior. The team members would prefer a woman superior. And out of this 20, 5 of them belong to that gender. In other words, this is not going to be a risk, but rather the possibility for that person to leave, and we are saying that 90% possibility is there, is becoming an opportunity for us. While a new woman employee comes in, the diversity within the team increases, and in this particular context, increased diversity is better. So remember, we are going to take that decision due to multiple reasons. And there is a tendency for a better performance, we prefer better diverse team, the superior belong to a different gender, and that's what typically people prefer. Then the superior handed over the resumes of all those people, the top, and especially the top candidate. And the top candidate, now what happens? If you are going to select a new employee from outside, there's a possibility that they may prefer to prove their worth and hence report a much higher performance than an employee who is already there in the system. Now, looking at the past information available in your data set, you are able to make that prediction. Second, this particular person, he is expected to join somewhere around 9% lower the salary. If you are going to offer the person 9% lower the salary, but report 21% higher the productivity, so the probability for the candidate, the top candidate to join right now is around 85%. Now as the new employee, you notice this person is not from the same metro, or maybe Ahmedabad. Join will go to 99%. We've already checked with the relevant stakeholders, and all the relevant stakeholders are happy with that kind of an arrangement. In other words, while we are allowing that woman or that particular employee, the potential candidate, to come and work in the firm only while critical meeting is happening, but all other deliverables she is expected to report, then the chance is moving to 99%. Now only, it is not just because of the average performance we are going to terminate a person, but that particular person is indicating more than 90% probability to leave within the immediate future. There are multiple other options we are considering in terms of what is going to be the productivity level, what is going to be the salary level, what is the probability for the new candidate to join, how it is going to affect the diversity within the firm. So we are looking at all those factors and taking a decision. We are not going to make that decision only just to save some penny or maybe some rupees. Now, while listening to all of them, you as the new employee, and also because of the curiosity, raise another question. Can I see my pre-interview analysis. What is the probability you have attributed to me to join in this particular firm? And what are your predictions about me? Then the superior, according to that particular article or in that particular book, says, we are an organization that prefer to be transparent. Our analysis about an employee will be shared during the time of the first performance review. That happens 1 year after your joining date. You just joined. And at that point in time, we'll share what we thought, and we will also share a part of our prediction about you in future. We would prefer to be a transparent organization, and according to the current estimate, you will see that report, and the probability to see that particular report is around 90%. In other words, everything is getting estimated. Remember, I'm not talking about what can happen today, but what may happen somewhere around 2013. The level to which HR may get evolved over a period of time by the improvement in HR analytics. Now, the question is, are we prepared to move into such a situation? So, this is what I was referring. The superior responded with a smile. As a transparent organization, we prefer to share it during first appraisal, and you have 90% chance to go through it. Still, 10% risk. Never we are saying that we are 100% sure. Looking at the past data, and also by updating the existing data on a continuous basis, we are making predictions. So please remember, HR analytics is not just about measuring things. It is about making predictions, and based on those predictions, we are also going to make prescriptions regarding how to improve the systems, the processes, and so on. So let me help you to go back to what we were seeing before. It's based upon the Sears example. So maybe a working HR professional may be able to appreciate it better. So when I look at what I shared based on the Sears, we were looking at employee-related outcome, the attitude and the behavior. Then comes in organizational outcome in terms of customer satisfaction, financial outcome in terms of, let me say, the sales turnover, and then comes the market-related outcome. So slightly more complicated, I'm not getting into that level, in terms of the share price. Now, think about the practices which you are following right now. Many of you are measuring employee-related outcome, maybe in terms of engagement, maybe in terms of employee satisfaction, employee commitment. But the next $1 million question is this: are you linking that employee-related outcome to organizational outcome? In other words, can we make similar kind of a prediction that while employee attitude improves by 5%, our organization's productivity, the quality of the output produced by our organization, the service satisfaction by our customers, all of them will increase by X units. Most probably you have got the data within your own firm, but somewhere in we are uncomfortable in connecting both of them, because in most of your organizations you are capturing the data in terms of engagement, employee satisfaction, sometimes attrition related data, but it is very much possible for you to link that information to organizational outcome. Now, similarly, from there we may need to connect it with financial outcome. While we are trying to improve engagement, maybe through some fun activities, maybe by increasing salary level, maybe by providing an extra training, or maybe having some other activity, what is the investment we are making and what is the return on investment that is feasible for us? So, typically, actually I just want to take some information from you. I'm going to talk about multiple types of assets which are there. Mr. Mahatma was referring that human assets as a concept. Can you guess what is the return that is possible from human assets? The return possible from human assets. What are the other forms of assets in a given organization? What is human assets? Other than that? Okay, production we may be talking about operational assets. The technology, the patent. Other than that? Infrastructure, we are talking about the physical assets. Then, financial assets, the cash, which an organization is having. Then, branding, marketing related assets. Now, which assets may report the highest return? According to the proven research studies, I'm an academician, so I should not make a statement which is not proven. According to the proven research results, the top 10% organizations are getting around 391% return on their investment in human assets. 391% return on investment in human assets. In other words, we do not need to suffer from the inferiority complex. There is no other assets. The examples which I mentioned, if I'm taking the top 10% investment opportunities can claim that high return. 2010 there was another research study that got published in Harvard Business Review. And typically whenever there is a recession, we may prefer to prune the budget for welfare initiatives. There they looked at well-designed welfare initiatives of companies like Johnson & Johnson and another 9 more organizations. They tried to measure the return from that wellness initiatives, and according to their research, some companies are getting $6 while they invest $1. That means the return to the tune of 600%. Now I'm going to give you an example from an automobile firm in India. So a large automobile manufacturing plant. This is an example which is shared with me while I was taking an in-company session for that organization. A large plant, let us assume that the plant is around 10,000 square meters. One factory itself. Initially they had a single place wherein drinking water is available. The organization decided to invest in welfare related initiatives. In other words, 10 or 20 aqua guards in that particular unit. What could be the possible return from that initiative? I would say that may move into 4 digits. Some of you may be finding it, especially those who are doing the program or maybe going through the first year course may find it very difficult to measure it. Let me tell you the cost associated with it, how to measure it. Measurement is the first step. What used to happen while there was a single water place or location wherein drinking water was getting distributed, or where there was a single aqua guard or a drinking water source was available. Typically there are 3 breaks in a general shift. In between the shift, the employees may report that we want to drink water, they stop the work and move on. Sometimes it may be a planned initiative. Their other friends will also stop their work and join. Even if it is not a planned initiative, they may tell somebody who is standing nearby to give them a company. All of them will walk towards the single place or the location wherein the water is available. Wait till everybody in that particular group have enough water and then come back. I'm talking about the improvement in productivity, the improvement in quality. Now while I look at from that particular context, the amount you may need to invest to set up an aqua guard, maybe around 20 of them, may comes to somewhere around 3 lakhs. But while you measure the return that such an initiative can bring in, that may move to 4 digits. In other words, we are looking at employee related outcome, its relationship with productivity and quality, and then financial outcomes. So what is the return we can get? Remember, right now we are not at the level of the analytics, but we are at the level of measuring the return from investment in human assets. And I am going to revisit it after some more time. So that this particular model is coming from the Sears study which I was referring to. Let me move to the current status relating with the cricket. How much of predictions are you able to do? During the next talk, Anil is going to discuss with you how they are going to make predictions about high performers who may leave the firm. Now, it's not only about terminations or maybe retaining good quality talent, but how to select an employee. What kind of a employee value proposition you are expected to give, and what is a combination you may prefer to provide to an employee. Similarly, what kind of a training program, and how do you need to combine training with compensation with the staffing practices. So all of them we need to consider. And while we make such decisions, are we estimating probability based on our opinion, or is it based on analytics? One of the questions for you to introspect. Second, are we happy with the predictions that are at 50% success rate, which is almost similar to the weather predictions in past? Right now we have improved the predictions in terms of weather also. We are able to forecast and predict the possibility for a cyclone. We are also able to come up with the precautionary measures which we need to take while such a cyclone is happening. There are multiple instances which got reported in India itself. So one is prediction, second one is prescription. So that itself have moved beyond 50%. It is not like the weather prediction in the past. But today's context, can we make estimates that are accurate? Are we still comfortable with our predictions which have got a value of around 50% itself? That's the second question which you need to ask. Are we focusing on data that is relevant? For example, as far as the India-Pakistan match is considered, are we going to look at the entire data that is existing and accept that Pakistan has got an edge? Or are we going to look at the relevant data? And that also may not be within subcontinental context, but we are looking at what typically happens while you play in a different kind of a pitch. So if you are going to combine the data that is not at all relevant, then there's a possibility for getting into wrong conclusions. So we need to consider, for example, for the top performers, the way in which we are going to recruit them, reward them, train them is going to be different from average performers. At different hierarchical levels, in different locations, we need to identify the relevant data. Then sometimes we may prefer to promote some commonsensical approach. And that's what I would like to discuss in a little more detail. Going back to the same HR value chain I was showing you before. In today's context, more than 90% of HR professionals will prefer, or they prefer to increase the engagement level of their employees. Higher the engagement, we anticipate that the productivity will go up. We also prefer to say that they may prefer to stay in our firm. I would say that's a commonsensical approach. Let me try to illustrate it. Or rather, how to bring in the concept of context. I'm continuing with what Mr. Mahatma was referring. There are multiple models. He was referring about the Maslow's model, which may not be valid in Indian context. He was referring about other things which we need to focus on. So engagement, higher the engagement is good, may not be applicable in every context. Let us look at, or let me talk about the previous automobile company itself. While you set up more number of aqua guards in the same factory, I'm talking about one unit, what is expected to be the engagement level of an employee? Will it go up or go down? Previously, there was a single unit. I'm talking about water source. People used to stop in between, walk in groups towards that single source of water. They used to come back. right now it is not considered to be legitimate. Even if you need to go, you cannot go to a location which is far off, somebody with whom you want to spend some time, but rather you are expected to move to a location which is closer by. And looking at all those aspects, typically while welfare initiatives goes up, engagement should go up. But while looking at this particular context, there is a possibility for employees to say, now working in this organization is not a fun activity anymore. Previously we used to enjoy working in this firm. Right now the job has become more routine, more mundane, or interaction levels among employees are going down. Sometimes we may prefer to increase engagement by increasing fun activities. And that fun activities may divert the attention, the energy, the effort of the employees into activities that are not directly related to organization's performance. So remember, organization goal, we also need to consider individual goal and societal goal. I'm just connecting it with our previous speaker. So sometimes we may go by this commonsensical approach. Increasing engagement is good. I can also refer to another study wherein I was involved in, another case based on which I wrote this particular case. 2 units. This I'm referring to a transport related unit. In one part of the India, their strategic goal is different from the other region of India. In one place they are trying to increase the profitability. In the other region, they are trying to increase the market share. Now the kind of engagement you anticipate from employers in these 2 contexts are entirely different. How will you be able to identify what kind of an engagement you prefer to have, and what is going to help you to attain your organizational objective? We need to measure it, we need to predict it, and we need to take the correct actions at the appropriate time, prescription. That's wherein the utility of HR analytics coming in. In some of the cases, or rather in most of the cases, you may be doing it without branding it under the name HR analytics. Then it is perfectly fine. The names doesn't matter. But the question is, are we able to do it, or are we going by what I was referring in the previous slide, some commonsensical approach, and so on. So let me just present you the entire picture of human HR analytics. Please remember, it's very difficult for me to cover in a session that is relatively short. Now, the best example I have come across, and I'm referring about an example that I heard in a conference, or rather a workshop, and there the concerned speaker was relating it to the way in which we go to a doctor. We go to a doctor. Typically while we go to a doctor, we report to him about the symptoms: stomach pain, headache, high fever. The doctor is expected to ask you the right questions, collect the relevant data. And collection of the relevant data refers to the first part of HR analytics. That's what I meant by descriptive analytics. Measuring, collecting the data. Once the data is available, what the doctor is expected to do is to make certain predictions. Sometimes the doctor is not expected to make predictions directly, especially because in today's context, even a patient can approach consumer redressal forum and file a case if a wrong diagnosis happens. So sometimes the doctor may suggest, I need more data. Why don't you go for these tests? And with the kind of the input available, the doctor is making a prediction. The concerned patient is suffering from this disease. That's what I am referring about, predictive analytics. Now, while the doctor recognizes or diagnosed that this is the disease, then we are moving into the next level of analytics, that is prescriptive. The doctor should not leave the patient by saying that this is the disease you are suffering from. the doctor is also expected to prescribe medicines, tell him to change some of his, let me say, bad lifestyle related activities, or sometimes the doctor may suggest the concerned patient to take some rest. All of them are coming as a part of prescription. In other words, we should not be just happy or contented only by collecting information. I'm talking about measuring. So typically in our organization we may prefer to gather a lot of information, and we have got so much of data, something like what is the time taken from the first interview till the day on which the employee is joining, what is the amount spent on a particular training program. Most of them are efficiency based data, and we don't know how to use the data. We need to have the relevant data. Then using that particular data, we should be able to make predictions. And what is the easier way to make the predictions? Related with organizational outcome, financial outcome. And while we are moving into the predictive analytics, that's a time wherein we need to use some kind of mathematical or statistical tool. I'm not getting into the details of statistical or mathematical tool, regressions, correlations, and there are more and more complex ways of making predictions. I'm not getting into all of them. And then based upon our predictions, we are moving into the prescriptions. So rather than frightening you just by saying that a larger part of analytics involves statistical tool, let me also tell you, HR analytics is more of a logically driven process. Very limited amount of analysis involves in it. So I'm going to prepare or give you a recipe which is coming from another book, and according to that particular recipe, the analysis part consists of less than 25% of the entire effort required. And some of the analysis may not require any mathematical ability. It may only involve qualitative analysis. For example, we may be more interested in stay interviews. Okay, that's a topic which Anil is going to cover at a later stage. Now, based upon those interview related data, or why we conduct an interview, well, let me look at from a staffing context. How can I get into conclusions by analyzing the answers from various behavioral interview? I mean the inputs based upon the answers the concerned candidate is giving for behavioral questions, situational questions. So we don't need to convert all of them into data and get into complicated statistical process. We need to have a logic. We should be able to identify the relevant data. If I'm going back to the India-Pakistan match, the period, the place wherein the matches were happening, rather than just collecting every information, if you're going to gather the entire information, analysis is going to be more difficult. So please remember, multiple authors who are working on HR analytics, the researchers always claim it is more of a logical approach rather than statistical approach. It only requires some kind of an orientation, a tendency to make experiment things and improve based upon the results we are getting. So if I get into, we should avoid, while I talk about this part, the HR, where am I? Okay, let me just go back. So one is we need to gather the hard data, understand it. So the first part, as I mentioned, is recording the data. Then we may prefer to relate it. So I was giving you the example of profit focus versus revenue focus. Different organizations may be having different hierarchical level, different strategies, different competitors at different locations. So it is not just about using the data as it exists. We need to relate it with the strategic objectives of the organization. We need to relate it with context as a second step. Then we may prefer to compare it. Some amount of benchmarking. Then we may prefer to understand the trends which are coming up. That's the fourth step. Then moving into prediction and finally prescription. So let me just help you to understand why don't you need to worry about the statistical part of it. Around 30% of the effort should go in gathering the relevant data. The next 10%. I'm making some modification based upon my exposure, my experience, rather than blindly following what the authors of the concerned book referred to. So I'm slightly increasing the stakeholding approach. In other words, whenever we are starting an HR analytic project, we should not get into analysis only by looking at the existing data. Rather, we should always ask the relevant stakeholders, what are your concerns, what kind of answers you are looking for, or how we can add value to you. So the major hypothesis, the theme for analysis, all of them are coming from our relevant HR business partners. And I remember last time, one of my dissertation student, he was doing a dissertation, he said, this is the data which I got from the organization. Let me start analyzing it. But what I should warn you, or what I should suggest you, the concerns of the manager, two managers with the same designation, operating in two locations may be having totally different concerns. Try to answer their concerns by the stakeholding approach. That's wherein you need to spend around 10% of effort, then only 15% in analysis. And within the analysis, please remember, a larger portion may involve qualitative analysis. You don't need to use statistical tools or methods. Then, the next 15% is all about storytelling. Remember, you have got certain interesting insights. Unless you are able to influence the relevant stakeholders, make sure that the prescriptions are followed by the relevant stakeholders, the entire effort you are investing will become a waste. So how to present the finding, the insights through a convincing story, using the skills of storytelling. So you need to understand the context wherein they are operating. So from that particular point, the storytelling involves another 15% of effort. Remember, ultimately we should be able to change things, improve things. Analytics should not end up just like another project. Now after that, we also need to spend a lot of effort in implementing it. So once we are getting the concern from the relevant stakeholder, while the person is willing to go by the prescriptions we are making, it requires tight deadlines. It may also require us to invest a lot of effort in implementing the same. That's the next part. And the last 10% should be spent on embedment. Here what I'm talking about, referring two or three major things coming up here. One, the accountability should be properly defined. Other HR members or the colleagues are going to get involved either at the implementation stage or at a later stage. So who is accountable for what? Defining the accountability. And also making sure that reporting relationships are properly embedded into the system. And sometimes while you continue with the entire project, you may realize that the initial approach you had was slightly different. The things are changing in the current context. The way in which you started your entire analysis was not accurate. Let me go back to the Sears example. They try to look at, to make sure that the workplace is, Sears is a compelling place to work. They were looking at the skills of employees, how they are developing over a period of time. But later when they started to analyze, things are changing. Multiple other factors are coming up. Attitude towards job, attitude towards the organization, they are becoming the most important predictor variable. We should be able to show that flexibility. And while things are changing, we may need to go back to our stakeholders, convince them why this is becoming more important. Why is it becoming critical? Influence them, get their consent. So we may need to go back to that storytelling, stakeholding once again. So this is the way in which you need to distribute your entire effort. And as an HR professional, whether you are involved in HR analytics or not, you're spending a lot of time in each of those steps already. So in other words, moving into an HR analytics, especially while I'm looking at the data analysis part of it, that involves only around 15% of effort. Even somebody who is not good at statistics, you may be able to get and another competent person, maybe from the strategy department or maybe marketing department, and trust me, they are very helpful while you ask their support. You are accepting them as an expert rather than you develop that particular expert and tell them to help you to analyze it, and while they give you some input, you may relate it, you check whether they are relevant, go back to the stakeholders, and once you are convinced about the relevance of it, you may change the process, the methodology, as I mentioned it, embedment again. So this is the way in which an HR analytic project need to be designed. Now, some of the mistakes we should avoid in the entire process. And there is also an ethical approach associated with it. First of all, sometimes we may believe human resource, talent issues, all of them are highly subjective, very difficult to measure. And typically while I take the sessions in a typical in-company program or during an MTP program, during the first day, I need to spend a lot of time in communicating to people why measuring talent related aspect or HR related aspect, why is it not very complex from any other type of assets. For some of the examples which I typically use are the following. I tell them to locate or identify their most preferred advertisement. Think about the most preferred advertisement. And if the marketing person of that particular organization need to make a claim because of the Cadbury advertisement, or previously Airtel had an advertisement, if I remember correctly, either Airtel or Vodafone, wherein the father got slightly ridiculed because the kids are good in technology. Is it Airtel ad or some other? Airtel only. Right now they have come up with a different series of advertisement, wherein they say it is better for you to have a very good relationship with your father because he can help you in multiple things. Now, how easy is it for the marketing person or the advertisement manager of that particular firm to tell about the utility of that advertisement? Look at the factors they need to control. Now, they need to look at the pricing models, what the competitors are doing, different types of advertisements they may be launching. All of them is going to have an impact on the subscription base, how often they are changing the, let me say, distributing the money into different kinds of services which Airtel is providing. So they need to work with hundreds of extra variables which we as an HR professional need to be worried about. In other words, in my personal opinion, I would say measuring HR is not at all impossible, but much more easier than various other forms of assets. Then still comes people with a lot of concerns. They may say highly subjective. Today's performance may vary tomorrow. Look, the way in which the cricket matches are happening, different type of pitches, different type of competitors, things may vary, but there are ways for us to control things. And to the people who are still not convinced, I ask a very simple question. What is the most objective thing you can think of? And I give them a context. For example, in this particular conference hall, what is the most objective thing you can consider? Any answer from the participants or maybe the attendees of this particular conference? The most objective thing you can consider. Okay, let me give you one possible answer. The number of people sitting in this room. What is the most objective thing? Then there is a follow-up question. Are we 100% sure that all of you are really in this room? In other words, if I move into a financial parameter, are we really sure that the profit mentioned in the annual report of a given firm is 100% objective? They typically talk about the amount receivable. There is no assurance that they are going to get the money. There are so many subjective factors which are involved there. In other words, it is everything has got a lot of subjectivity element to it, and what we are trying to do is to reduce that subjectivity through various empirical measures. In other words, it is possible for us to improve measurement for everything within HR domain. May not be 100% perfect, 70% predictable, 80% predictable. Around 20 years back, while asking a question, a very simple question, what's your gender, what's your marital status, we typically used to give 2 options. Gender, 2 options. Marital status, 2 options. Think about today's context. How many options do we need to consider about marital status? Even while we talk about gender, I'm talking about the kind of subjectivity which is coming up. It is impossible for us to become 100% objective, and we should also become more comfortable to work within higher levels of uncertainty, higher levels of ambiguity. That's wherein I say the storytelling, the ability to influence people. I'm not telling you to fudge the data. I'm not telling you to misrepresent facts, but how to convince stakeholders, that's a skill, that's an ability. First of all, we should be very comfortable in working within ambiguous situations. Now, never limit analytics to ROI initiatives alone. I do not have time to get into the details of it. So typically, while we measure the return on investment, we prefer to keep intangible things like engagement, motivation aside. In an ROI approach, what is prescribed, we do not want to get into it. But in today's context, based upon the examples which I mentioned just before, it is possible for us to give monetary value for everything. Not 100% perfect, but within acceptable levels of predictability. So never stop your analytics at the level of ROI. Now, HR analytics is not just about HR measurement. We need to move much beyond it. We also should be able to monitor the changes. For example, while the strategy changes, while employee moves up, while they get a promotion, what's happening to their performance record? Do we need to sack an employee, or do we need to suggest the person to go back to his previous job? Sometimes we may go only by the conventional wisdom. Okay, this person's performance have gone down. Let us look for another person from outside. But there are multiple other options which are worth considering. Second, or maybe the fourth one is very critical. We should not use analytics an excuse to treat human beings just like widgets. Our objective is not just to improve profitability. That's why I would prefer to go back to the future scenario once again. Remember, we are not terminating that employee only because his performance have gone down. Not just because there is another alternative person available at a lower salary who is expected to be of higher productivity. There are multiple other reasons for it. And we are looking at organization context, and there are also human ways of dealing with it. So HR analytics is not going to remove the human part from the entire HR. We need to remain humane, and we also need to come up with multiple options. Just one more illustration connected with the previous automobile case. I was talking about installing aqua guards. Maybe in one unit, they need to spend around 3 lakh. If there are 3 different factories or maybe 4 factories, one may be engine manufacturing unit, another one may be transmission, the third one may be the paint manufacturing unit. Let's assume that there are around 5 or 6 units, and to set up aqua guards in all of them, they may need around, let me say, 10 lakh rupees. Now, there is also another proposal, sending the general manager for a training program in Harvard. One, setting up aqua guards. Second, sending the general manager for a training program in Harvard. HR analytics should tell you which one is more beneficial for the firm. And I was suggesting setting up aqua guards may give you 4-digit return. In other words, the objective of HR analytics is not just to make sure that the life of people at the top very happy, but rather we are coming out of the elitist approach. We are looking at who can make maximum contribution to the firm and what kind of an initiative is going to be mutually beneficial for all the stakeholders who are involved. But remember, we should never compromise on these ethical aspects. So that's another thing which we need to consider. And the last one, we should not make HR analytics a very simple process. There are so many smart people around. Sometimes they may be able to gain the entire process. For example, they know this is what I need to do to get a promotion. This is what I need to do to get a transfer to the location of their desire. So it should not be made very simple. There should be transparent processes, but they also should be getting updated on a continuous basis, looking at the utility for the entire firm. Then there are multiple examples I can take you through. All of them are the examples. I think 2 of them are the one which I read in other books. Other 3 are the initiatives wherein I was personally involved with in terms of projects. But what is time now? 3 to 4 minutes. Okay. Which particular initiative you would prefer me to discuss? Any option? Yeah. Okay. First one and the 5th one. Okay. 5th one I have got an example which I read from a book. 2nd one I got an example shared with me by a participant from Ahmedabad in one of my programs. So I would prefer to go to the example shared by, and that was his concern, and he was attending one of the MDP on HR business partnering, and the CEO called him up by saying that you introduced a new system that is creating more problems. So I will take you through it briefly, then I will also tell you about the first one that is based upon an academic study. Now remember, while investments are made in HR or investments are made in an organization, that may not be only on HR domain alone. A part of it may go into HR, maybe in terms of increasing salary, maybe in terms of increasing training that is provided to people. Sometimes that may also involve transfer of people and the various other welfare facilities associated with it, sometimes selecting a new employee and introducing an HRIS. For example, what is the amount you are going to pay to the service provider. So in this particular study, what they try to look at, which combination results in maximum effectiveness. In other words, how do they need to distribute? They looked at multiple organizations wherein human resource information systems got introduced. And for the purpose of the control, they looked only at the customers of one major HRIS provider. If there are multiple providers, you need to control for that too. So they took data from multiple customers of a human resource information system, and the process all the customers have gone through in terms of implementing that human resource information system. So they looked at whether the salary level of the people got increased, whether there was a promotion associated with it, what kind of a training program provided, one for the people who are directly involved in different stages of ERP implementation, people who are going to be using it, and they looked at different combinations, and based upon the entire sales history of this organization, they were able to come up with the right combination. The right combination of investment required for getting maximum effectiveness. And I know that right now I told you only about what they have done and what was the final results they have got. There are also other steps involved in data collection. Go back to the previous thing which I mentioned, 100% effort, how do you need to distribute? So the analytics parts will involve only around, or maybe the data analysis, the statistical part is just around 15 to 20% of the entire effort, but another 70% is on various other aspects. The data may be there with every organization. So it was an initiative by a researcher, a doctoral student, in collaboration with an HRIS provider, and that particular study got reported in United States. That's one. Second, one of the very common quoted example related to KRAs. So this is based upon an organization which is into FMCG product. First I'm referring to the research study. There they're talking about 3 KRAs which employees are responsible for. Number 1, they are expected to stock the products in various outlets. They are expected to convince the people regarding how many items they need to stock, how to display them. So they are also expected to deal with the employees or maybe the owners of that retail outlets. They are also expected to drive the vehicle. So there are 3 KRAs involved. How to deal with it and which aspect may be resulting in better performance, better profitability of the firm. That is the context of the first study. I am not getting into it, but rather let me get into another project wherein I was able to give some valuable suggestion to the concerned employees. So in this particular organization, there were employees who were working for a long period of time. It's mostly a family-owned organization from Gujarat itself. They are mostly into, okay, I should not mention the product, but the only one additional, the company, but the only additional information which I would like to share, they need government subsidies to a larger level. Okay, in other words, a part of the entire product cost will come from the customer, a part will come from the government. Now, for a long period of time in this organization, there was no performance focus. Everybody was getting equal levels of salary. And a new HR person joined in this particular firm. He said, from next year onwards, what we are going to do is to give increments based upon the the sales which you are going to report. And there were some young employees who got joined in this particular firm. So 1 year they all worked, and towards the end of the year, while they were identifying the increments or maybe the bonus that need to be distributed, the variable pay, they realized majority of the old employees are reporting below par performance. The senior employees are mostly to be terminated, but the junior employees are performing very well, and many of them are reporting more than 100% targets. Then there was some information before announcing it. The information has gone to the CEO. The CEO asked for additional details. What happened in this particular context, in their effort to become a performance-oriented firm, they try to give undue weightage only to one KRA, that is the sales that is getting reported. But the senior employees, since they are coming from the past culture, they shared all the contacts they have got with the junior employees. And while junior employees are able to make the sales and get the government subsidy, they were mostly relying on the contacts which the senior employees have cultivated over a period of time. Now, if the organization is going to sack all the senior employees who are reporting less than 60% of sales target, the next year the same employees are also going to find problems in attaining the target, because they may not be knowing majority of them. And they used to work. There was also a problem related to the way in which the sales amount is getting categorized, and they may not be having so much of contact with the government officers who are expected to sign on those bills, approve the amount. In other words, there are multiple KRAs coming in. Sometimes we may focus only on things which are more objective in nature. The sales amount that people are able to report. We may not get into the other details which are more subjective in nature. The way in which you need to deal with the government officers. The kind of social capital you were able to develop over a period of years. And what is the utility of that particular social capital? While everything is going to be measured only in terms of the performance of the sales figure, there's a probability that you may lose the entire social capital organization has developed over a period of time, and the same juniors may not be able to develop it. So how do they need to address it? Look at multiple KRAs, give due weightage for all of them, so that ultimately the organization is going to benefit. So sometimes it is not just going by the conventional wisdom. We need to look for the objective data, the sales figure, try to reward the people who are getting high sales. There are different weightage which we need to give, or different roles that need to be created for senior employees who may not be willing to go and spend a lot of time, let me say, in the field, visiting multiple the clients or the customers, etc. So there are multiple other HR initiatives, the prescriptions which are coming out based upon the further analysis of this data. So I know that I haven't given you the complete information. There are also confidentiality clauses which I am also expected to honor, but I am just giving you the way in which we need to move to prediction, and also the way in which prescriptions are coming from, the kind of blunders we may commit in the process. So with that, let me close it. What should I do? Do I need to take questions, or shall I wait?
So we will take combined.
Yeah, fine. Thank you very much.